Okay, so thank you so much for taking an interest in what we're all about and our greenhouse design. Very grateful to be with you guys tonight. So, kind of our background of where we got started. So, Joe and I had previously lived in a home, and we quickly realized that we were outgrowing our green space. We had used up every possible square inch of our garden, and we had really big plans that just didn't fit anymore. So in 2017, we started entertaining the idea of either looking for a home with more land, more outdoor space, or building something that we could really customize and put a lot of energy into the sustainable way of living. So we obviously went the latter route. So in 2018, we bought a piece of land that was all untouched, beautiful virgin forest. And we started kind of dreaming and coming up with what is now our little homestead. So a lot of that had to do with not only expanding our gardens, but incorporating solar panels, trying to come up with ways that we can really live off the land, reduce our carbon footprint, and kind of keep nature in the forefront of how we run our home. So these are kind of the highlights of what we're going to be going over today. So obviously an introduction about where we kind of started, who both of us are. The big one here, the Walipini design and construction, how it works, what we're getting from it. The green shed, which is the secondary building that we have at the back of our lot that you'll see in the photo there. The performance of both of those structures, our lessons learned, things that we would do differently, things that we're pleased with, and then some references so that if you guys have any questions that we can't answer, or if you'd like to explore some things on your own time, then you can go off and look at that as well. And then, of course, we'll have a Q&A at the end. Any questions so far? I'll take the silence as a no. Okay, so just a little bit about me. So my name is Megan. I grew up here in Nova Scotia on the South Shore on an old farmstead. I did not love gardening. This was something that I kind of came into later in life. It was not a passion of mine. My mother had a small kind of kitchen garden, and it was a chore. So it was not enjoyable as a young child. I'm not going to lie about that. But after Joe and I met, we kind of found a joint passion in growing and kind of seeing how we could push the boundaries and grow more than just the standard vegetables that both of us had grown up with. So now I'm really passionate about, home cooking from the garden, exploring new ways to incorporate things in the kitchen. If I could have the entire backyard full of sunflowers and pumpkins, I would. I don't think it's in the cards. And a fun fact is when we had Hurricane Fiona come through, we had a ton of caterpillars, so monarch caterpillars on our milkweed plants. And before the storm actually made landfall, I made Joe dig up the plants and pot them and bring them into the Walipini so that we could save all of these monarch caterpillars. So that's just a little bit about me.
So for myself, I grew up in Saskatchewan. I started out on a farm. So I've been used to farming. I've liked gardening since I was young. But I was, for argument's sake, a traditional gardener. I always tilled the garden, used lots of chemical fertilizers. If I saw a bug, you sprayed it. And then I joined the military, and I tried to garden every time I got posted. It was difficult. So I was very happy to reach the state that I'm at now when I left the military, and I could have a house for a long time and have a bigger garden. I was even happier to find Megan, who was willing to share that with me and not complain because I was spending so much time in the garden. So it worked out well. In our neighborhood, we're kind of known for our gardening. We give away lots of seedlings to our neighbors. We save our own seeds. So we have even some of our own varieties of like peppers, for example. And when other neighbors decide that they don't like nature and there's snakes and spiders in their yard, we usually rehome them and put them in our yard so that they don't get killed.
So gardeners in crime. So a couple little points about kind of what sound living is for us and how we live. So maintaining net zero lifestyle. We have solar PV, we have hot water, we have a Tesla now that we're loving. We use a lot of smart technology in our home to monitor our consumption and make changes as we go. We have a rain barrel, so an underground cistern tank that holds 3,000 gallons of rainwater that's collected from our roof. And that's actually our primary source of water in addition to having a well. So that comes in handy when we have the backyard. And right now we're not getting a lot of rain. So it's a little concerning, but we do like having that backup. We grow year round with our Walipini and our green shed, and we'll get more into that in a couple more slides. A big thing for us is creating a natural habitat. So we really try and live with nature and not work against it. That means that, yes, we definitely have deer in the yard and wildlife that that munches on some of our crops, but that's the price that we pay for living where we are. Vermicompost, we got into worms a few years ago, and we're reaping the benefits of that. So all of our organic kitchen scraps feed our worm hotel in the basement, and we use the byproducts on our garden, which is a cheap and wonderful way of supplementing our soil.
So that's a bit of background on us. I'm going to focus on how we built our Walipini and some specifics of the design. I understand that that's what you're most interested in, so I hope you find this useful. I've put a fair amount of detail here. So this shows different stages of construction of the Walipini, from framing to putting it up to actually starting to harvest food as we were going through our first winter. Megan wanted to put this picture in just because it's so pretty, showing some of her flowers and the Walipini at sunset. So I guess interesting point is what can we get out of a Walipini? So you can see dates on the bottom when we harvested the vegetables and the fruits that you see in the picture. So even in the, near the end of December, the first day of winter, we were harvesting tomatoes and peppers out of our Walipini. And in February, we were still getting decent sized broccoli plants. And it's actually interesting because we have an orange and a lemon plant that live outside in the summer and in the Walipini in winter. And the fruit that grows on there tends to ripen in the middle of winter. So it's neat to be able to go out and get fresh citrus fruit.
So what is a Walipini, I guess?
So yeah, I guess first maybe what is a Walipini, or what makes a Walipini special? And essentially it's a very, I guess, aggressive passive solar geothermal design for a greenhouse that's actually embedded in the ground. So there you can see that was one of my original concept sketches as I was designing the Walipini. A very high back wall, which is on the north side, a low south wall, so that you can see the angles I drew there would be for us, for our latitude, where the winter sun would be on its lowest point and where the summer sun is on its highest point, and how that would generate sunlight inside the Walipini. So our goals in generating the Walipini or designing the Walipini was to use very little energy, but still be able to grow food 12 months of the year and build it so that it would last a lifetime. There's other people in the province that have built Walipinis, and they're very nice, and they were actually, I'm sure, much cheaper than ours. But they have had problems with structural issues and walls getting wet and starting to come down, that kind of thing. So I wanted to learn lessons from them. We talked to them before we built ours. And so we built it really like a house, and it's intended to last as long as a house. And you'll see that as I get into some more of the details. So this is a 3D sketch of the Walipini that I did up. And just a kind of a quick overview, it has a proper cement foundation with proper drainage. That was one of the few things I had done professionally because I wouldn't be able to do that myself. I built the rest of the structure on my own. So it's dug into the ground. It has a ventilated floor for geothermal heating and cooling. We use two 55-gallon water barrels to have water, especially in winter, to avoid having to turn on the outside taps. As well, they provide thermal storage. The Walipini itself is well insulated, better than some houses. It's R27 above ground, and we insulated the cement to R10 down to 4 feet, so basically down to the frost layer. And we have high-pitched triple poly windows mounted at a 47-degree angle to catch the winter sun. So that has R2.5, and it lets through 70% of the light. So it actually ends up being quite bright in there. And the way that the triple ply poly is it tends to diffract the light. So it brightens up the whole inside of the Walipini. You don't see many shadows. So picture of the foundation, again, looks, pretty much like you would see when a small house is going up, properly poured footings and foundation. Again, about 8.5 feet in the back and 4.5 feet in the front. If I could have, I would have gone probably another foot deeper just to get above warmer ground. And the idea with going deep in the ground is you want to get below the frost layer so that you can actually be pulling heat from the ground even in the middle of winter. So for the floor, so once the foundation was poured, the next step was to put in the floor. And you can see I used basically the same type of pipe that you would use on a septic system that has holes already pre-drilled in it, put caps on the end, and I put in 2 pieces of pipe, one on both sides, and then put in large rocks, so kind of grapefruit size rocks. Covered that over with landscape fabric and then covered that over with gravel, basically to seal the floor. And what that gave me was the ability to blow air in and suck air out of the floor and use the temperature differential between the inside of the Walipini and the floor to either move heat out if it was too hot during the day or to bring heat from the ground into the Walipini if it starts to get cold at night. So then on top of that, we started to build the structure. It has 2x6 walls so that we can get in the R22 rock wall, another inch of foam on the outside of that to give us R27. I used 2x12s for the back roof, which again let me put basically 6 inches of insulation, but then also leave an air gap so that I could ventilate above the insulation, much like you would need to do in a normal attic. And then in that case, I put the 1-inch foam on the inside. The windows or the glazing, I guess, for the greenhouse is 16mm triple ply poly. It's fairly expensive, but better insulation and really good quality. We've already gone through 2 hurricanes and our greenhouses have not had any issues at all. And then we used casement windows. So one mounted in a door and one just a straight up window on both ends to allow for ventilation. And you can see that we put a solar fan in the roof. So we open up the windows, air gets drawn in through the windows and then pulled up through the roof to move heat out of the top of the Walipini during the day. And then for finish, on the inside, I bought mold resistant panels similar to what you would do in a bathroom where you're going to put in tiling. So a little bit different than just straight drywall. Covered it all with elastomeric paint. And then I put in the fan. So I have 200-watt inline blower fans, one to pull air from the ceiling and push it underground, and another one to pull air from underground and move it into the Walipini. So I can push and pull at the same time or just run one or the other. And then we have, and you can see there's a little blue heater down in here. That's really the big energy consumer if there's anything. So on the very coldest nights, when it starts to go below 5 degrees, I'll usually turn that on. But we've only been using about 30 to 50 kilowatt hours a year. So less than $10 to heat this thing and to run it for a whole year. So that's pretty cheap. Everything else is run off the solar fan. And then 2 foot deep hugelkultur hemlock raised bed. So we put branches and debris and leaves and things from the yard from when it had been cleared and cleaned up in on the bottom of the beds, and then we filled it with garden soil and compost. So that actually reduced the amount of soil we needed. Plus, as that wood rots, it basically becomes a sponge and helps to hold moisture, and it gives somewhere nice for the roots to grow. And then along the back wall, you can't really see it in these pictures, we put shelving along the back, and we use that for our spring seedlings especially. It works out actually really well. And then, like I had mentioned before, we've got 2 water barrels in there as well.
Were there any questions? I guess this is a good kind of touch point. Any questions about the Walipini so far? No.
You said about the water barrels. Are they, the water barrels are there to get some heat as well?
That's right. So during the day, it actually helps to keep the greenhouse a little bit cooler, because when the water is cooler than the air, it's pulling heat. And then at night, the heat comes back out of the water and into the Walipini. And it does actually help. I've monitored the temperature, and you'll see on the performance slide, I think I've got some numbers, but I've monitored the temperature in the water barrels to see how it goes up and down from day to night. And it's kind of interesting to see how it correlates with the air temperature. You can really see the cooling slow down as soon as the air gets cooler than the water. Everything starts to slow down and the water starts to cool off. So we did some very similar things in a green shed, which I thought you might find interesting. The benefit was it was about $5,000 cheaper to build because we didn't have to dig the hole in the ground. I still put it on a cement pad and insulated the pad and insulated the greenhouse, but I didn't have to worry about digging a hole in the ground or finding a hill to mount it against. So we had slightly different goals. We wanted to have a home for our seedlings, and we knew that this would still freeze in the wintertime, but we figured we could grow some cold season vegetables in there. And as well, we just needed storage. I had to get some stuff out of the garage. So like our pots and our garden tools, we thought we'd put them down there handy to the garden. I've designed in an option to put a small chicken coop. Would probably hold 4 to 6 chickens. So I have the venting in place and a door, which I've currently got covered over and insulated. But if I wanted to, I could open that up pretty easily and put the chicken coop in. And as well, we just wanted a spot to relax in the summertime and get out of the sun, because our backyard was designed so that the plants would get lots of sun, but it does get very hot. And we've left the option to screen it in, but we haven't bothered to do that yet. It's also, I found the porch to be quite handy when we're hardening off plants and I don't want them to be in direct sun. I can put them on the porch and they'll either catch morning or evening sun. So there's some pictures of it. So again, designed as a 3-season greenhouse. It's got a 5-inch concrete floor, and I put R20 foam insulation underneath. So the floor now, similar to the water, acts like a thermal battery. It gets actually quite hot during the day. And when you walk in there in the evening, even if it's cold in the yard, it feels like you're standing on top of a radiant floor heater, even though there isn't any radiant floor heat. It's just the heat in the cement itself. And it gives off heat all night. And again, the walls are insulated to R27. I found that worked quite well. Another solar powered fan to help with ventilation. And in this case, we put in a 700-liter water tote to act as our thermal battery, as well as to provide water. I do empty that near the end of November. I kind of give up and empty it out because I'm worried it's going to freeze. And then I refill it usually early in February. So really only about 2 months of the year, we let it freeze inside this particular structure. And then we've got a man door and a 6-foot garage door. I really like having the garage door. It's nice for bringing big things in and out. We've also set up the garage door so that I can lift it to about 16 inches and just hold it there so that we can get more airflow in there during the day if it gets too hot. So in terms of performance, our Walipini, when it's in the sun and even in the winter time, you can see I've got some plots of temperature down on the bottom. It will get up to 30, 40 degrees. So middle of winter, on a nice sunny day, you can go sit in the sauna in the Walipini and enjoy the heat, which is kind of nice, especially because we're so cheap with our power in the house. Often the Walipini is warmer than a house. At night, it'll only go down to about 5 degrees if I run the floor fans. I can also, of course, turn on the heat. And I've experimented back and forth with different ways of doing things. I'll talk a little bit farther down the slide. So we've got the ventilation fans that they help it heat and cool. And then we've got that backup heater. And I've set the temperature on the backup heater so that when it's running, it keeps the temperature about 6, maybe 7 degrees in there, depending on how cold it is outside. So I'll usually turn it on when it goes below -20. If it's above -20, then the Walipini is fine with no help at all. The green shed, it's shaded in the winter. The sun goes behind the trees, so it doesn't get much sun. So it tends to be more kind of 10 degrees during the day and about -5 at night. So even without anything extra helping it, it can be -20, -25 outside, and it's still only about -5 inside that structure. So lots of hardy plants that can handle some cold temperatures do fine in there. And again, overall, very little power used. Our first winter, I was a bit of a chicken. I kept it about 10 degrees in the Walipini, so I used about $30 in power to do that. But now I've kind of gotten cheaper, and like I said, I use usually less than $10 a year just to really kind of knock off the really, really cold nights. And then in the second winter, I was braver. I decided I wasn't going to run the heater at all, and I only ran the floor fans, and I used less than $1 of power. But the problem with running the floor fans that I found was it pulls a lot of humidity from under the ground. So the humidity was really high in the greenhouse, and I'm finding I would rather keep it a bit drier and just run the heater. So for the extra couple of bucks, it really doesn't make much difference. And I do have a link there, and we can send the slides. I had done a little bit of a blog, and it has a bit more detail on performance if anybody's interested in reading more detail. So just as a couple of examples, I put I'm a bit of a geek, so I've got temperature monitoring everywhere. So 8th of March, so fairly early in the spring, it was -13 outside. It was still 12 degrees in the greenhouse, and -10 outside in our yard and 2 degrees in the green shed. So about a 15 to 25 degree temperature differential with no extra help. So that time of year, actually in February, we plant our tomatoes in the greenhouse. Sorry, in the Walipini, to be clear. So for lessons learned, I mentioned some of these, I think, already, but they're probably good to recap. I would have gone a bit deeper if I had the choice, probably at least another foot. I ran into rock and shale, and it wasn't easier to get any deeper. So I just decided that would be good enough. I could have lowered the pitch on the roof in order to get the front wall a little bit deeper. I struggled with that a bit. The trade-off is the pitch is at a really good intermediate pitch to get lots of even winter sun. The lower the pitch, the less winter sun you're going to get. So potentially you'd want to use something like LED lights to keep plants happy in the middle of winter if you go deep on the front and the back. This is just something that I learned, and if I had been a contractor, I probably would have done it right the first time. I should have put pressure treated lumber on for my sill plates, and there's foam that you can buy to put underneath just to help keep water off the bottom. So that's probably the first place I'm going to have damage, is those will start to rot before everything else. And the other thing I found, as the sun's coming up and going down, I get less sun in the greenhouse at the kind of beginning and end of the day. I've seen other designs where you put some glazing on the east and west walls to let a little bit more sun in when the sun is like farther in the east and the west. So I probably would change that. I haven't done it yet, but I want to put in a hardware mesh screen door. We've tried just leaving our door open, but then we have birds fly in the greenhouse, and if we don't catch them quick enough to help them get out, then they die, and I don't like that. So I've been just cooking everything instead. But if I put in a mesh screen door, that would help. The birds wouldn't be able to get in, but the bees and insects still could. And I think we probably all think this from time to time. We could always use more space. So we built the Walipini, decided we need more space. We built the green shed. We still need more space. Some of the good things, the shelf I talked about that we put on the back wall is really, really handy for putting seedlings. We've got a bunch in there right now. We did design a cover for the entrance. So let me go back, see if I can find a slide. So yeah, that right here on the entrance, I designed it so that I could cover it over and have less heat loss through the doorway. I've seen other designs that do that, and I think it's a good idea. We just haven't found that we really needed it, and then I don't have to worry about shoveling off the door and opening it up in the middle of winter. And like I said, we don't use the floor fans very much. I think it's a good idea and it works, but it does make it harder to control the humidity. So this is just, and again, we can send the slides, but if anybody's interested in some of the tech that we use for monitoring and controlling the greenhouses, I've got a link here for fairly sophisticated monitors that I can also use to monitor soil temperature, water temperature, light, humidity, and they work over Wi-Fi. So I can be anywhere in the world and I can be looking at the temperature of my greenhouse if I want. They are fairly expensive. I also have much cheaper Bluetooth monitors that I just have to get my phone close to it and I can pull the data from them. So I've got links for that. Two versions of smart plugs, one that's just an on-off type plug, still quite useful, and a monitoring smart plug in case you want to actually measure how much power is going through the plug. And one of the techniques you can use to run all of this automatically is, it's called if this, then that. You basically give it the logins to your different devices. And I could do something like, say, if the temperature in the greenhouse goes above 30 degrees Celsius, turn on my input fan to cool it off. If the temperature in the greenhouse goes below 5 degrees Celsius, turn on my heater. Things like that. So that all that would happen automatically without me having to do anything. And then I've also got a link for the solar fan, which I bought just at Kent. I find it's really handy to be able to move air around without using any power.
Before we got into the more like sophisticated monitoring and the automation, there have been times where Joe has gotten an alert on his phone that says, you know, the Walipini is at 40 degrees and we forgot to open the windows. And I have had to drive home from work and open up the windows to the greenhouse. So this has actually been very, very handy because we don't have to worry about that as much anymore. So.
And so another set of links I put in to help. I did a lot of research before we started building our structures. A lot of that actually came from resources created by the University of Minnesota. So I put the query to bring up a bunch of different documents that they created, as well as some specific ones that you might find useful. And I put a link to where we bought our glazing, which is actually came out of Ontario, and noted that I do have, if anybody is interested, I have a CAD drawing of our Walipini that I could provide you. And it's a free program that you can use to manipulate it called FreeCAD. So if anybody is interested enough, I'd certainly be happy to send you a copy as a starting point if you want to for your design.
Or if you're interested in the cost breakdown too, of the build and the materials that we've used as well, just so you can kind of have a baseline.
Well, and just, I guess, quickly, the Walipini, the foundation and the excavation work was about $10,000. And then it cost me about $10,000 in supplies, and I did the labor to build the rest. The green shed was about $5,000 to do like the excavation work, put in proper drainage, put in the pad, buy the insulation to go underneath the floor, and then about $10,000 to do the structure again. So that's kind of rough numbers. You can certainly do it cheaper, but like I said, these are intended to last as long as a house, and I think they'll get pretty close. It'll be about the 25-year point. I'll have to replace the shingles at the same time. I'll have to replace the glazing. It should be probably pretty much done by then, just because of the UV light. But if I get 25 years before I have to do any real maintenance, that's not bad. And just for fun today, other than the fox, I walked around and took a couple of pictures of what's going on in our greenhouse right now. So you can see over on the left, this is actually a tomato plant we planted in February. And we've got the spiral spikes that we tie it to. The tomato plant's actually at the very top of the spikes. And there you can see our seedling shelf. And we've got rather large tomato plants that are aching to get outside. And here we've got flowers and peppers and various things in our green shed hanging out and quite happy. We've got a volunteer nasturtium just above our ventilation in the Walipini. Some of our herbs that have been in there now, going on 5 years, broccoli plants, and then some pictures of our lemon in bloom sitting on top of one of our water tanks.
And the fox, which we've affectionately named Todd. We have names for most of the resident wildlife in the yard. So,
yeah, well, last year we had Peter the rabbit and Gary the groundhog.
Who's back for another year.
Yeah, Gary the groundhog likes our broccoli.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have lots of friendly animals. Does anybody have any questions? Did this hit the mark? I hopefully we gave you something that is interesting for you.
Or if you had questions, even not while.
Sorry?
Can you produce enough food for the year?
Yes and no. We preserve a lot. We have a cold room that we designed into our house, 2 freezers, and then a storage room. We still end up buying some fruits and vegetables. Like, for example, in the middle of winter, we still want tomatoes, and we don't have tomatoes all year round. So not everything, but pretty close. And I'm working on getting closer. That's one of the reasons why I started some plants so early this year. Like, we've already harvested broccoli for this year. So we're getting close. I figure we save, what did I say, about $3,000 a year in groceries off of what we grow. And we give a lot away, which we really don't count the value on that. But I guess I'm trying to remember when we had our first salad this year. It's pretty early, I think like February. Mm-hmm. Like February, we were eating fresh salads out of the greenhouse. We would still add some store-bought tomatoes to it, but all the greens and everything was coming out of the greenhouse.
Where did you get your seeds or for growing the lemon and the oranges that produce? Where did you get the plants or the seeds or?
That was from a local spot here in Nova Scotia, Carlson Family Farms. So they had like little seedlings, and I think we got them, what, three? I think this is the third year with them.
Third or fourth,
Yeah.
I think. But yeah, we found some neat local suppliers. There's another supplier I've used. So we didn't talk about like our food forest and stuff. And at some point, if you're interested, we could certainly share information on that too. But so one of the things I did was I bought nut tree seeds from Incredible Seeds. They have some pretty neat atypical plants. So we have heart nuts, pecans, pine nuts, chestnuts, hazelnuts. So that'll be part of reducing our grocery bill as well. We're slowly converting to vegetarian. I don't know that we'll ever be full vegetarian, but once our nut trees start to produce, it'll make it much easier to get protein from plants. So we've started to get that kind of thing as well. And there's lots of good suppliers, in the Maritimes that we can buy seeds from or buy plants from. Another place that we've bought a lot of kind of odd things from is Richter's Herbs in Ontario. So we got our elderberry plants, our sea buckthorn, some really nice lemongrass. We've had lemongrass growing in the Walipini now, I think, for 4 years. You can see it just kind of hiding. The same plant year to year. We're into 3 years with the same parsley plant, which I always thought they were biennial, but I kept cutting off every time it tried to go to seed last year. And now this year it looks like a fresh plant again.
Do you plan on having chickens?
Sorry?
Do you plan on having chickens?
I'd like to. I've got this. I have the spot set aside for them. I just have to decide that I have the time. There's some things that, even though we've been here now almost 5 years, like, so for example, we planted grapes, but I still don't have the grapes properly trellised yet. So I have to get those jobs done before I'm allowed to have chickens.
They're lower on the list.
But they would be lovely, and that would be another great source of protein. Plus they like to eat ticks. And we do have ticks in our yard, even though there's less of them now. And I think they would help with other things in the garden. And probably help eat some of my cabbages or something too. But
do you have deer fencing around your yard?
we don't. I did think about it, and I planned that I could fence in our garden, but I just really don't want to go through the effort. We think about 20% probably of our produce every year to wildlife. To be honest, probably our groundhog was worse than the deer last year. But we grow enough that losing 20% isn't a big deal, and then we just enjoy the wildlife. So yeah, we haven't tried to fight the deer off too much.
I have given up on growing tulips though, because I'm tired of losing that battle. But the rest of it I can handle.
You said there were less ticks now. Is there something reason why there were less?
So as best I can tell, and you can actually see in this picture, we have a lot of wood chip paths. And my understanding is that ticks don't like wood chips for some reason. So maybe they don't migrate through the yard as much over the wood chips. That's one of my guesses. And maybe just because of the way that we've kind of cleared stuff off from the original kind of forest area. It's hard to tell here, but this part of the garden is actually all an orchard. There's probably 10, 12 fruit trees here, plus some rather large elderberry bushes now. They weren't as big in this picture, but they grow probably 12 feet. All of our nut trees are in the front yard. And then we've got more wild stuff that likes to spread on its own along the edges. Like we've got sea buckthorn out here. We're going to plant some choke cherries and other things out on the edge of the lot. I've got sumac, which also likes to spread on its own over in our wildflower bed, which is over on this side. but this is all food forest. So we've put beds in the middle of the orchard to be able to grow things like squash, ground cherry, onions, potatoes, things like that, grow in amongst our orchard. And I guess one of the things we didn't have here, a neat thing that happened for us, because we did a lot of hugelkultur, or at least I think that's why, we ended up with wine caps just by accident. Mm-hmm. So we harvest
mushrooms.
Yeah, I don't even know how many mushrooms we get every year, but probably 10, 15 pounds of wine cap every year, maybe even more. So there's lots of mushroom soup and mushroom sauces we get for free.
Is this presentation available on the internet with the picture and all that? Could access to it?
It isn't, but we can certainly send you the presentation. We have another slightly different presentation we do for garden groups that isn't as detailed on the Walipini design, but it talks about the food forest and some of the other things we do. I guess the other thing that might be of interest, we don't have a power bill. The solar panels and the hot water actually covers all of our energy costs for the house and about 2/3 of the energy cost for our car. Plus the province pays us so that they can charge our car when they want to. So when there's excess power, our car will charge itself, all just basically through a smart app. So our power bill last year was $80, power and gas bill. So it's kind of neat to get to that point. There was obviously an investment. It cost us about $16,000 for the solar panels, about $7,000 for the hot water. That was our cost after the rebates, but they'll pay for themselves in under 10 years, and they should last over 20 years. So it's a good investment.
Do you guys have any grants when you set up with Nova Scotia? Like here, because we actually look into that solar panels. When you go totally off, you can either go totally off grid, that you're not connected to the network at all. But if you're connected to NV Power here, you basically, you sell everything to them and then you get taxed on what you take. Even though you give them more than what you take, we get taxed on what you take. And then like the cost was still, you put so much effort, 20, 40, 30 grand into the system and you're still getting taxed on what you take. It's like, it's not really fair.
It's a better deal here. For us, we got an awesome deal. So our solar panels actually cost $26,000, but we got a $10,000 grant. So it cost us $16,000. And our net metering plan is such that every kilowatt we give to Nova Scotia Power, we get back the same kilowatt at the same cost. So there's no extra tax. Mm-hmm. And the way we could actually produce extra power and get paid for it at the same rate that we would pay for power. But like once we noticed we had extra power just with the house, we got the electric car and we're using that. So we don't actually we're short about a megawatt hour a year. So about $150 at current rates. But because we get that other money, the $20 a month for charging our car and covering we have a meter charge of about $10 a month. Like I say, last year it worked out to be about $80, and once it was all considered. We got $10,000 for the solar panels as a grant. We got $1,000 for the hot water. We got $3,000, I think it was, for our car because we bought it used. And then we got $5,000 for the house because the house was designed to be energy efficient as well. We have an EnerGuide rating for our house, which is actually 0. So basically saying that we produce as much power as we use. So it is, I mean, in terms of an investment, it's good for us because we want to be green, but it's also good for reducing our bills. And if we ever go to sell our house, then it has a pretty good pedigree to help with the sale price.
Other question?
Last chance, any questions?
No, I would like to get the card as well. I missed part of it.
Yeah, if you don't mind, then send me the PowerPoint. I can share it with the participants today.
Of course.
Yeah, that's very nice. Okay. So thank you so much, Joe and Megan. You're super impressive. It's like talking to a dream house couple. I don't know what. So sounds like, yeah, it sounds like unreal, but it's great to see.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for taking an interest.
It was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a nice summer.
Yeah. Okay.